Hi, I am your loud Puerto Rican live, Magdalena Gomez, coming to you from Amherst Media in beautiful downtown Amherst, Massachusetts. Thank you for being there. Thank you for showing up. We got to do this ourselves. Today is a benefit for Puerto Rico for relief and relocation efforts. All of the money that we raise today are going to go to the Boston Foundation .org, TBF.org. And all of this money is going specifically to their Puerto Rican relief and relocation efforts. This organization has been around for a very long time. They're trustworthy, and we're thrilled to be able to support them in the efforts to support our people, los Boricuas, because they are everyone's people. And, by the way, we are citizens. So, where do I start? I want to acknowledge the music that you heard over the slides, the Getty slides. Thank you, Getty, for the Getty images. Oh, we haven't seen them yet. Okay, well, they're going to be coming up and you're going to be seeing them soon. So let's just start with a piece by a wonderful New Rican poet, Sandra Maria Esteves. Sandra Maria Esteves is known as the godmother of the New Rican literary movement. Let me tell you a little bit about Sandra and me personally. I met Sandra when I was in my 20s, and I was part of the Joseph Papp Theater Festival, which is now known as the Public Theater in New York. I was in a playwriting workshop there, and she took me under her wing. She wasn't much older than me, and yet she saw my fear, my insecurity, my desire to learn the playwriting craft. And she was generous and extended a hand. She extended love to me, as she's done with so many other poets, both women, men, young and old. Sandra Maria Esteves is always there to lift up and encourage other poets. She is a Dominican, Boricua, New Rican poet and artist. She was born and raised, like myself, in the Bronx. A founding member of the New Rican poetry movement, she writes poems engaged with themes of social justice, environmentalism, and personal transformation. She is the author of numerous collections of poetry, including Portal, Undelivered Love Poems, and Yerba Buena. She has recorded spoken live poetry CDs, Divinations, and Wildflowers. Esteves' work has appeared in numerous anthologies, including a beautiful one by Mirna Nieves, and it is called Breaking Ground, an anthology of Puerto Rican women writers in New York from 1980 to 2012. The Afro-Latin Reader, History and Culture of the United States, that was edited by Miriam Jimenez and Juan Flores. Sandra Maria's work can also be found in that. And Aloud, Voices from the New Rican Poets Cafe, 1994, that was edited by Miguel Algarin and Bob Holman. Her honors, and it's important to talk about the honors. You know, it's not just about the publications, it's the honors. It's about the human being, and it's about the beauty and generosity of our people. Her honors include awards from the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York Poetry Foundation for the Arts, the Bronx Council on the Arts, Accentos Poetry Collective, Blind Beggar Press. Esteves has served as the executive director of Caribbean Poetry Theater and has shared her work with the Smithsonian Museum of the and the Museum of the American Indian and the Kennedy Center. Yes, of course I'm nervous. This is live. I'm supposed to be talking to a camera like I'm in a living room with you, so I gotta feel you. Let me feel you. Close your eyes right now and send me love. Let me feel you. Let me feel you. There we go. That's better. Sandra Maria lives in New York City, and here is a poem that she has dedicated to Malta Moreno Vega. One of the things that's very common among New Rican poets and Puerto Riqueño Boricua poets in general is a desire to honor other artists and to be there for them, as Sandra Maria Esteves has been there for me. Spirit Dance for Malta Moreno Vega. When spirits dance mambo, El Egba opens the roads. Carnival colors fly in circles. Ancestors call our names through drums that speak, mixing cultures in rhythms of Spanish saints and African slaves. Spirits come like the heart of Africa, beating our Nigerian history from the land of Yoruba, herbs, animals, rocks, and sacred symbols in harmony with nature. The ancestors come. The essence of ancestors comes to dance the Black culture of resistance, teaching values and ethics for conflict resolution and protection from colonialism. They come as Orisha, hidden from Catholic conquerors behind brilliant curtains, keeping God alive. In the back rooms of roots united in respect from one to one. They dance in regla, tu ocha, palo muerto, bantu, muelteros, cimarrón, espiritistas, who receive energy messengers of spirit, healers from Mother Goddess and Father Creator, visible presences rooted in Congo culture. Struggling to create a nation, landing on the shores of America with nothing but their bodies, no books, no sacred carvings, no special photos. No special photos of loved ones back home, just knowledge stored in the mind and body of their memories, bringing their religion of reference to be shared with the world, to plant seeds of life, meant to grow great and grand beyond the chains that enslaved, that forbade them to dance in Oro Seco, where only the drum talks, in the language of Bata, Abacua, Arara, and Congo, rumba, giving birth to salsa song y guaracha. You tamboreros in matanzas becoming mother of rap, hip-hop, jazz, blues, reggae, and rock, in context with the young avant-garde of African thought. When spirits dance mambo, African and Hispanic traditions merge into new bloodlines of God love, full of light. When spirits dance and move our feet, our hearts beat to the drums that speak. Sandra Maria Esteves, written in 2005. So there was a mention of the Orishas. I am wearing an Orisha here. I am wearing Yemaya. She is the mother of all children in Yoruba tradition. She is the keeper of all waters, and we ask her to protect the people of Puerto Rico. And this beautiful pendant was made by una artesana boricua, a Puerto Rican artist by the name of Olga Ayala. Olga Ayala lives in New York, and she has made depictions like this in polymer with beads, beautiful work of all the Orishas. And her work is just filled with love. Another beautiful person, and I know a lot of the poets personally because I was part of the New Rican literary vanguard in New York. So Willie Perdomo. Willie Perdomo, I remember I was doing one of my solo shows in New York called Chopping, which is the way my mother said shopping. And I was so happy. Willie, he's so busy. He's a professor, he's performing, he's reading, he's writing, and he still made time to come and see my show in New York. And that really meant a lot to me. I also had the opportunity to work with Willie Perdomo at the 2050 project, which took place at Amherst College and was part of New World Theater that was started by Roberta Uno at UMass. And Willie there worked with young people, passing on his knowledge and encouraging and building people up. And he's just another one of those beautiful people who I am honored to know. Willie Perdomo is the author of the essential hits of Shorty Bom Bom. I love that title. That was published by Penguin Poets. And Smoking Lovely by something I may not be able to pronounce correctly, but I think it's Ratapalax. But I would say Puerto Rican style, Ratapalax. I hope that's okay with you, Willie. Ratapalax. He was the winner of the Pen Beyond Margins Award. And Where a Nickel Cost a Dime, it was published by W.W. Norton in 1996. Willie was a finalist for the Poetry Society of America's Norma Farber First Book Award. His work has appeared in New York Times Magazine, in BOMB, in Mandorla and African Voices. He is a Pushcart Prize nominee, a former recipient of the Woolrich Fellowship in Creative Writing at Columbia University, and a 2-time New York Foundation for the Arts Poetry Fellow. Perdomo is also founder and publisher of Cipher Books and is currently an English instructor at Phillips Exeter Academy in Exeter, New Hampshire. Yes, we're everywhere. Willie Perdomo, poet in Harlem. That night he went looking for a poem. He left his electric typewriter humming on the kitchen table and ran out to the wide sidewalks of Lenox Avenue. Aunties sat on their stoop box seats, mixing cheers and gossip and beers on the down low. With arms thrown to the sky, I celebrate a touchdown. A poet must look at the whole picture. One man's victory is stalked by another man's loss. The voice inside my head began to whisper, damn, one of them young bloods might grow to be a poet in Harlem. Or the little brother who caught the game-winning touchdown might have to sleep in the street one day. That night, he went looking for a poem. He found 2 colors of love. A teenage couple embraced by a bus stop. I read his lips as they whisper a sweet something into her smile. And that voice that never goes for a walk comes to visit again. I hope their dreams come true. In one ear, and it stood, as the poet turned the corner, he bumped into an ancient argument. 2 fallen angels with scratched throats pull and push each other. Ain't enough for both of them to get high tonight. Used to be he would serenade her under a clear moonlight, and that voice meets him in front of the liquor store. Ain't no room for kissing and hugging in the middle of the night when luck is hard to find. The poet came back to his kitchen table with the last voice that sounded like the blues. So he turned the electric hum into this poem. Show me a woman who is strung out on love. I want to support her habit. And that was the work of Willie Perdomo. I have so much I want to share with you. Where to start? Oh, poet Victor Hernandez Cruz, one of our best known poets, most widely published, Victor Hernandez Cruz. I met Victor Hernandez Cruz here in Amherst at the house of Amherst resident Dr. Faith Turner. Faith Turner created a book, I believe it was 1991 or 1993. It's actually up here somewhere, maybe hidden away, but it's there. Faith Turner created a book called Puerto Ricans at Home in the USA. She and I struggled with that title, but a beautiful, beautiful anthology and a collection of works by poets who perhaps were not as well known at that time. And in her home, she invited us all, Judith Ortiz-Coffer, Victor Hernandez Cruz, Jose Angel Figueroa. Many of us were there in her lovely home here in Amherst, Massachusetts. And that's where I met Victor Hernandez Cruz. And what I was most struck by Victor Hernandez Cruz was he was like an elder statesman of literature. His dignity, his warmth, his intelligence, just how we said in the Bronx, he was a mensch, and he is a mensch. He's still with us, and I am so grateful for that. Victor Hernandez Cruz was born on February 6, 1949, in the small mountain town of Aguas Buenas, Puerto Rico. He moved to the United States in 1954 with his family and attended high school in New York. Cruz began writing at the age of 15, as he explained, to balance a lot of worlds together. the culture of my parents and the new and modern culture of New York, its architecture, its art, and its fervent intellectual thought. In 1966, he published the chapbook Papo Got His Gun, followed by his first full-length collection of poetry, Snaps, published by Random House in 1969, when Cruz was 20. Imagine that. A young Boricua in 1969, at the age of 20, published by Random House. No small feat, eh? About Snaps, Allen Ginsberg wrote, "Poesy, news from space, anxiety, police age, inner city, spontaneous urban language, as Williams wished. High school street consciousness, transparent, original soul, looking through intelligent Bronx windows." Allen Ginsberg. Cruz is a co-founder of both East Harlem Gut Theater in New York and the Before Columbus Foundation, and a former editor of Umbra magazine. He taught at the University of California at Berkeley and San Diego, San Francisco State College, and the University of Michigan. His honors include fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the National Endowment of the Arts. He served as Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets from 2018 to 2013. Cruz currently divides his time between Morocco and Puerto Rico. Dolores Street by Victor Hernandez Cruz. Through the Victorians, spinning a wool of music, the gang in the breeze, boys and girls headed toward the park, no longer in my view, wondering now what they doing, how they divide, hold hands, lay on benches. Breathe. Dolores Park Green, waving mounds where downtown looks like you. You could stretch and scratch it. You can see the water smaller, the other side connected by the Bay Ridge from this angle appears as a cowboy rope lasso. Back to the park. Across the street is windows. Suggest eyes, which could have been looking at savannas, stretches, had it not been for transportation. The city settling up from planks and kerosene lamps, rugged. Small vocabularies full of passion, found a gold sliver on the way to my fruits. Raise the air fair, let the news out, rush like Hawaiian beer. The big radio of teenagers comes again looking for the curtain. Look, them wasted clothes wrinkled, eyes fresh, like just arrived mushrooms. They move to the interior of the mission where they hang out. Generations on the streets. And that was Victor Hernandez Cruz. Otro por Victor Hernandez Cruz. This one is entitled Two Guitars. Two guitars were left in a room all alone. They sat on different corners of the parlor. In this solitude, they started talking to each other. My strings are tight and full of tears. The man who plays me has no heart. I have seen it leave out of his mouth. I have seen it melt out of his eyes. It dives into the pores of the earth. When they squeeze me tight, I bring down the angels who live off of the chorus. The trios singing loosen organs with melodious screwdrivers. Sentiment comes off the hinges because a song is a mountain put into words. And landscape is the feeling that enters something so big in the harmony where we are always in danger of blowing up with passion. the other guitar. In 1944, New York, when the trio Los Panchos started with Mexican and Puerto Rican birds, I am the one, that one who held them tight like a woman, their throats gardenia gardens, an airport for dreams. I've been in theaters and cabarets. I played in an apartment on 102nd Street after a baptism pregnant with women. The men flirted and were offered chicken soup. Echoes came out of hallways as if from caves. Someone is opening the door now. The two guitars hushed, and there was a resonance in the air like what is left by the last chord of a bolero. That was Two Guitars by Victor Hernandez Cruz. I'd like us to take a moment now for reflection, and I welcome you to view some of the images from the Getty Foundation that will show you what is going on in Puerto Rico and the devastation of the island. We're in it for the long haul. This is not just uploading our donations, but we need to think long term, because we the people have to do it for ourselves. So I welcome those images and ask you to please reflect and think about Puerto Rico.
El viento trae sus dolorosos recuerdos, la lluvia al lanzar busca sus blancos inocentes. La neblina es algodón en la botella de píldoras, cada pastilla es un alma perdida y un día encontrará su tribu. Poncho para los dos, un poncho para los dos. Un poncho para los dos, un poncho para los dos. Las nubes se van cayendo una tras una, los árboles tienen hipo por sus consumos. La tierra entretiene el retiro, oxígeno, hidrógeno son buen amigo. Un poncho para los dos, un poncho para los dos. Poncho para los dos.
I'm glad you got to see the images. I'm grateful for those Getty images. And I want to say thank you to composer, vocalist, and musician Abraham Gomez Delgado for donating his music to play underneath Un Poncho para los Dos. Abraham Gomez Delgado. He's somebody I've been working with, another Boricua, another brilliant Puerto Rican who at the age of 20 created an album called Jayuya, which the master composer, who you may know about, Fred Ho, master composer, baritone saxophonist, said was one of the top 5 albums that he admired in his lifetime. And this is one of our greatest Chinese-American composers, the late, great Fred Ho. I also want to encourage you to do the kind of thing I'm doing now. I'm taking a huge risk. You know, I'm flying without a net here, and we didn't have a whole lot of time for this, and I want to thank Amherst Media and all of the people here who are helping to make this happen. And if it wasn't for them, hey, and guess what? It's all guys in the room. It's all guys in the control room. It's all guys behind the camera. And they're just so beautiful. And who knows, maybe at the end we can bring them up here. We'll see if that's possible. But in the meantime, please, you know, if you have an access station near you, and many of you will across the United States, a media access station, you can go in there. And you can be trained, and you can learn, and you can make your own programming like this to support the causes that you believe in. If you believe in Puerto Rico, if you want to support Puerto Rico, Mexico, all of the other islands that have been devastated, all of the other countries around the world that are experiencing devastation, because it's not just Puerto Rico, we have to remember all of our human family, then you can go into that access station, and you can do a marathon, and you can read about those cultures. You can do a dance-a-thon. You can do it. If you can dream it, you can do it. Hey, Stephen Colbert, shout out to you for doing the puberty photograph. I'm going to send you one of mine. Look, I'm not famous, but I think I should be able to get you at least $5 with that picture, okay? So I'm going to send it to you. And Jonathan Baptiste, I'll never forget the day I met you. What a beautiful human being that you are. When I saw you on Stephen Colbert's show, I was thrilled beyond words, because the passion that you have in life is the passion that you bring to your music. So shout out to you both. And I'd like to read a poem of mine from Shameless Woman that was published by Red Sugarcane Press and in New York City. And it's called Madre de Bomba. Think about how many of you know your grandmother, knew your grandmother. I never knew either of my grandmothers, so I had to make one up. And this is for her, Madre de Bomba, because sometimes we have to invent our memories. And I dedicate this to Fred Ho. If I had an abuela, she would have fangs. X-ray vision for men who make false promises, and a special tea to make them true to their word, refilling their cup until she is satisfied. If I had an abuela, she would carve dragon heads into her rocking chair that come alive when she is angry, sending fire into the places where she wants it and away from where she doesn't. My abuela would dance naked at the Hunts Point Market in front of the cherries that would spill their juice at the sight of her. No one would dare call the cops or laugh, and I assure you, someone would carry her basket of jautilla up the 6 flights to her apartment, thick-skinned roots multiplying in her boiling pots of Boricua kitchen generosity. My abuela would keep a machete by the door, a rosary in the pocket of her bata. Muggers would drop dead from a look, and just in case that didn't work, there would always be a live mousetrap in the pocket of her pocketbook. For rapists, bullets in her nostrils, cobras in her ears, a camphorated river layered in her breath, alum in her tears of rage to suck dry even the thought of raising a hand to her. My abuela would have mule legs kicking open the smarmy face of injustice. My abuela would not be polite if there is too much salt in the bacalao and leave the table if there is not enough. My abuela would love Motown as much as Loíza, swing from the branches between Boric and Cuba, tell you about blackness as you stretch, iron, bleach your hair into submission, offering you the cigar of intelligence. Give you another chance. but not too many. Fools belong to worms, she would say, and sink her fangs deep into your heart. Until there is room for light and music to enter. Penetrar, penetrar, I see, penetrar, penetrar, I see, penetrar, 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 until you are satisfied. Abuela would be the mother of all bomba, history's clean ocean in which I would happily drown. It's bomba from Shameless Woman. Madre de bomba. Oh, anecdote. Got to tell you the story. So, I used to work at the East Harlem Music School back in the 70s and the 80s. And that school was started by the very well-known composer and musician, Johnny Colon. Johnny Colon started the Boogaloo Blues music. How many of you have heard Boogaloo Blues? I'm going to pretend that I can see you. Raise your hand if you've heard of Boogaloo Blues. I see Maria, I see Roberto, I see Stephen, I see Tom, I see Mary. Okay, so some of you have heard of Boogaloo Blues. Many of you have heard of Boogaloo Blues. Anyway, so Johnny Colon was running this music school out of an old firehouse in East Harlem. And some of the greatest of all Boricua musicians used to teach there. And I had some remarkable students. One of my students at that school was a singer, Mark Anthony. Another one was Majora Carter, who you know as the one who greened the Bronx. You also know her as a MacArthur Genius Award recipient. And you know her as someone who took something like $10,000 and turned them into $3 million to green the Bronx and create work opportunities and to just turn it into a more beautiful place. That South Bronx where she grew up and where I grew up and where she still lives and does the good work of greening the Bronx. So one of the people who worked at the East Harlem Music School was a man by the name of Mihai Adrian Eres. Mihai Adrian Eres had been the poet laureate of Romania. He was a man with 2 master's degrees who was exiled from his country with his family, and he was only given hours to leave. They packed 2 shopping bags, and this family of 4 arrived in New York City. Although Mihai Adrian Eres had 2 master's degrees and was the poet laureate of his country and could speak English fluently, the only work that he could get here was driving a taxi and doing the books at the East Harlem Music School. And Lord knows, none of us made much money at that school. Johnny was making that go with air and passion. And so Adrian, he was a poet, he was a publisher, and he wanted to see the work of the people of the East Harlem community published. And he knew that we were not being published. In fact, many of us were being erased. So he took over the copy machine when Johnny wasn't looking. Hey, Johnny, if you're listening now you know. So he took over the copy machine at the East Harlem Music School, and he started to create his own poetry newsletter, Nuevas Palabras. And these are beautiful treasures that I am donating, among other things, to my archives at the Thomas J. Dodd Research Center at the University of Connecticut at Storrs. And inside of these beautiful issues, there you see, when is July 1983. You can see the date right there. I'm sure a lot of people, a lot of artists have done this kind of work. A lot of folk artists have done this. I know La Esperanza, La Voz de la Esperanza, that comes out of Texas, is a newspaper type of newsletter that still comes out. And in these books, he had, the poetry of children. He had advertising for the community. He told about workshops that were going on in the community. It was information sharing and poetry. So even though we had nothing, we had a regular poetry journal called New Words, Nuevas Palabras. And let me just read you some of how many people were published in these things. Aidel Vega, A.J. Bagal, Beck Timmons, Roger Watkins, Joseph Tusiani, Amy Sue Arnold, Laura Drummond, Sonny Gettinger, Heidi Brandstadt, Bobby Baje, Gregory Mitchelltree, F. Duget, Jeff Quick, Lydia Roman, Scott Jaffe, Edwin Pimentel, Bulletin Board, Jennifer Isaacs, Katie Lesnar, Magdalena Gomez, ooh, Victor A. Wheeler, Mihai Adrian Eres, always putting himself at the end, and Raul Santiago Sabasco in this little thing, okay? So this beautiful, beautiful thing. So there is the poet laureate of Romania, okay, at a Puerto Rican music school in El Barrio in the 70s and the 80s, making sure that our people get published. And here it is. And who are our people? Our people are the people who stand up. When people ask me, who are you people? I say, the people who stand up for justice. Those are my people. And Mihai Adrian Eres is one of my people. And I'd like to talk to you now about another person who mentored me, who supported me, like Sandra Maria Esteves did. And that was one of our seminal poets, Pedro Pietri. You may know his most famous work, Puerto Rican Obituary. And Pedro died in 2004, and I'd like to start by reading to you the New York Times obituary. You know, it's not morbid to read obituaries, it's a document of history. And for a people who have been systematically, the attempt has systematically been made to erase us, this obituary has great meaning, and so does its content. So please, bear with me. Pedro Pietri, 59. Poet who chronicled New Yorican life. March 6, 2004. This obituary was written by David Gonzalez. Pedro Pietri, a poet and playwright who chronicled the joys and struggles of New Yoricans, urban Puerto Ricans whose lives straddle the islands of Puerto Rico and Manhattan, died on Wednesday en route from Mexico to New York. He was 59 and lived in Manhattan. Mr. Pietri had been at a holistic clinic in Tijuana since January because of advanced stomach cancer. He was flying back to New York for specialized treatment of a bleeding ulcer when he suffered renal failure, and said his sister, Carmen Pietri Diaz. And yes, I am going to get emotional, and I'm going to feel this because I cared for Pedro, and he always supported me. Mr. Pietri's poetry about the competing cultural tugs of New York and Puerto Rico was often playfully absurd. He was perhaps best known for Puerto Rican Obituary, an epic poem published in 1973 that sketched the lives of 5 Puerto Ricans who came to the United States with dreams that remained unfulfilled. By turns angry, heartbreaking, and hopeful, it was embraced by young Puerto Ricans who were imbued with a sense of pride and nationalism. Through countless poems and plays, he continued to write even after his illness was diagnosed late last year. He defined the New Yorican experience, inspiring a new generation of Latino poets, myself included, including the streetwise slam poets whose provocative performances were showcased at the New Yorican Poets Cafe, a Lower East Side institution that he helped to found. His writing has been included in many anthologies and translated into more than a dozen languages, although his books are hard to find in this country. Though often humorous, his work was also deeply political, like the performance piece, El Puerto Rican Embassy, which he staged through New York with the photographer Adal Maldonado. At ceremonies where he sang the Spanglish national anthem, Puerto Rican passports were distributed, their pages filled with poetry and images of dominoes and roosters. This idea of an embassy for an island that is neither independent nor a state captured Mr. Pietri's own nationalist beliefs. Quote, "This is about proclaiming the whole thing about being sovereign without the trials and tribulations of armed conflict," end quote. He said in an interview with the New York Times in 1996, quote, "You don't have to leave or go anywhere. You don't have to be a radical or wear a beret. You just have to have a passport." End quote. Mr. Pietri was born in Ponce, Puerto Rico. Saludo, Ponce! And moved with his family to Harlem when he was 3, eventually settling into the Grant Houses, a housing project on Amsterdam Avenue. His father, a dishwasher at the St. Regis Hotel, had come to New York ahead of his wife and children. His interest in poetry, his sister said, was encouraged by their aunt, Irene Rodriguez, who often recited poetry and put on theatrical productions at the First Spanish United Methodist Church in East Harlem, where the family worshipped. He started composing his own poems when he was a teenager at Harlem High School, his sister said. After high school, Mr. Pietri worked in a variety of jobs in the garment district. His friend and biographer, Robert Waddell, said, "He was drafted into the Army and served with a light infantry brigade in Vietnam, an experience that Mr. Pietri said had further radicalized him." Upon his return, Mr. Waddell said, "Mr. Pietri barely lasted 1 week working at a hospital before he quit in disgust to pursue poetry." The Methodist church he attended in his youth became the stage for his first public reading of Puerto Rican obituary, when the Young Lords, an activist group, briefly took over the church in 1969. Mr. Pietri read his poem as an act of solidarity. It was the beginning of his association with activist causes, including the fight against AIDS. In addition to Ms. Pietri Diaz and his brother Joe, both of New York, he is survived by his wife, Margarita Deida Pietri of Yonkers, and 4 children. When doctors told him he had inoperable cancer last year, he sought alternative treatment in Mexico. Within a few weeks, his friends and fans had donated $30,000 for his care. Their generosity, he said, was humbling and reassuring. Quote, "We're still together despite our differences," he said in an interview in January, shortly before he left for Mexico. He said, "I see the foundation of a community that ensures our survival, that perseveres. This history we made, these poets we created. We are here to stay, and they can't replace us." And one of the things that is left out of this, I'm glad to see it does mention that he was a Vietnam veteran, but what is left out is that he was exposed to Agent Orange. Just as our country right now is being exposed to an orange agent. Here is a poem by Pedro Pietri called "Traffic Misdirector." The greatest living poet in New York City was born in Puerto Rico. His name is Jorge Brandon, 1902 to 1995. He is over 70 years old. He carries his metaphor in brown shopping bags inside steel shopping cart he travels around with on the streets of Manhattan. He recites his poetry to whoever listens, and when nobody is around, he recites to himself. He speaks the wisdom of unforgettable palm trees, the vocabulary of coconuts that wear overcoats. The traffic lights of his poems function without boring advice from AC or DC current. Bookstores and libraries are deprived of his vibes. To become familiar with this immortal poet, you have to hang out on the street corners, building, stoops, rooftops, fire escapes, bars, parks, subway train stations, bodegas, botanicas, iglesias, pawn shops, card games, cockfights, funerals, Valencia, bakery, Hunts Point Palace, pool halls, Orchard Beach, and Gucci frito stands on the Lower East Side. The admission is free. His presence is poetry. Pedro Pietri. That was Traffic Misdirector. And before I read another poem by Pedro, I want to tell you about the time when I was director of religious education at Holy Name School on 96th Street and Amsterdam Avenue in New York. I know, hard to believe, but you can imagine the kind of arts and religious education that I promoted, eh? Anyway, I had 650 children under my care. Many of them were Boricua and Latino, African American, Asian, and I had no budget. I made $215 a week, working a 60-hour week in a place that I really loved, where I was really happy and did not mind the 90-minute commute each way. But I wanted to bring something else to the children. You know, it shouldn't just be about the art that I was creating or I was bringing to them. That's not enough. I wanted them to be exposed to great artists. So with great trepidation, I asked Pedro if he would be willing to come. I admitted to him that I had no money, and I've always believed that artists should be paid a just wage, just as any other worker. We are cultural workers. And it was embarrassing to ask him, but because it was for my students, I got up the guts to ask, would you come and do an assembly for our children? There are 650 children in the school, and we can fill the assembly for you. And he said, yeah, man, why are you even worried about asking me? Of course I'll do it. And he showed up in his full regalia of Pedro Pietri and his whole spirit and his whole love. And he held those children captivated for an hour-long assembly. And they went wild, and they were proud, and they were happy. And all I had to offer Pedro was a hug, my thanks, and school lunch. And he did it. And he was always like that. He was generous. And that is a common thread through all of the Boricua poets that I know, is their generosity for humanity, for each other, and for the world. Here is another poem, and it is a series of telephone booth poems that he wrote. And this one is number 905 and a half. Telephone booth. Woke up this morning feeling excellent. Picked up the telephone, dialed the number of my equal opportunity employer to inform him I will not be into work today. Are you feeling sick? The boss asked me. No, sir, I replied. I am feeling too good to report to work today. If I feel sick tomorrow, I will come in early. Telephone booth 905 and a half by Pedro Pietri. Oh, here's a beautiful moment. Sandra Maria Esteves, whose work I read earlier and I spoke to you about, Sandra Maria, as you know, also one of my mentors at the same time that Pedro was. They were both at the Joseph Papp Theater, now known as the Public Theater, in the Playwrights Unit, and they both took me under their wing and supported me. And you know, everything that I am and everything that I do, I could not have done without the people on whose shoulders I stand. Every person in my life who touches my life, with whom I share a short conversation or with whom I share a lifetime of friendship, every one of those people makes up who I am, and I am grateful. And all of these poets who came before me, who inspired me, are the reason that I am here, and I'm the reason that I have thrived as a poet. So I thank you. I thank all of you beautiful Boricua poets who have nurtured and sustained me throughout my life since my very early youth. This is a documentation that Sandra Maria wrote while riding an Amtrak train going up to Springfield, coming to visit me, and also working in a project that was called Explorations in Puerto Rican Culture that was done in the Springfield schools for 3 years, where we worked with educators on how to integrate the arts that are relevant to Puerto Rico, all of the arts, the music, the visual art, the writing, the literature, everything, how to integrate that into the curriculum of the schools. And Sandra Maria came up to be one of the teaching artists, and she stayed with myself and Jim, my husband, who, by the way, is the executive director of Amherst Media, and I want to thank Amherst Media once again for making this happen. And I love that Jim, and Sandra Maria loves that Jim too, by the way. So she wrote this beautiful poem while looking out of the window on the 3.5-hour Amtrak train from New York up to Springfield, Massachusetts. And it's in her Wildflowers album, and she dedicated it to me. And the reason I'm reading it is because today's my birthday, and I want to celebrate it with her in this way, even though I am not with her. Today I am 64 years old, and I know you're all supposed to be going, "What? She's 64? I don't believe it." And if you're not doing that, well, don't talk to me, okay? So anyway, this poem is called Puerto Rican Discovery number 44 for Magdalena Gomez. I take it in, I receive it, and I say thank you. On the Amtrak to Springfield in June, those wildflowers that grow where no one can see them blossoming in all their fiery splendor, for whom does their beauty persist? Their brilliant oranges like songs to the sun on hills that hide off the side of the road or near riverbanks where leisure boats rest in their affluent docks. Do these earthly delights grow for them? Clusters of daisies, daylilies, purple and pink azaleas sprout from cracks between rock slabs thrust from the earth. Was this Amtrak's careful landscaping or nature's casual abundance? Primroses, sundrops, sweet peppers, and hemlocks, dogwoods, winter greens, shinleaf, the prince's pines, Indian pipe, beech drops, mayflowers, and pinksters in luscious greenery that clothes the majesty of summer. Like offerings to cloud spirits on the altar of spring by water towers, railroad tracks, grain silos, and farmlands. Within dense forest, open fields, tennis courts, and backyards, under billboards, bridges, fences, and power lines, near shopping malls, family homes, lumber yards, and parking lots, mountain laurels, Labradors, huckleberry, and calico, Cassandra, rosemary, cranberries, and checkerberries along churches, shipping ports, dance halls, and graffiti walls, against sawmills, wishing wells, station houses, and city parks, in the company of willows, woodlands, wetlands, and truck stops, cows grazing, and horses romping. Swamp candles, lamb kills, loose strife and blue weeds, creeping and fringed, tufted and narrow-leaved. Greenness thrives from every space of ground, silver and maroon wealth of weeds and vines. In between, twin dancing butterflies, lavenders and chickweeds, mosses and mushrooms finding their way. Fungus and flora following their secret calendars, silently hidden in perfectly timed feasts. Spontaneous branches reaching upwards and outwards in a brotherhood of life, growing and dying in cycles of returning, unable to confine the fullness of their being with their nesting and hoarding, their pollinating and harvesting, home to bird families, squirrels, insects, and amphibious tender roots peeking out from the mortar crevices of bricks in defiance that refuses to follow regulations and rules of containment. Something happens in my eyes and beyond seeing in the midst of these intertwining forms, leafy, random, and carefree in their fractal infinities. Some part of my soul is refreshed, renewed like the moist earth after the rain. All this beauty, I think, this buffet of earth greening so precious, these gifts here for me, for each of us, and my spirit settles as I breathe. And I know that I am alive. And Puerto Rico is alive, and Puerto Rico will continue to thrive. And I invite you now to please, let's spend a little more time with those images of Puerto Rico, the Getty images, with the music of Abraham Gomez Delgado, suspending them so that we can have a moment to reflect on how blessed we are.
Un poncho para los dos. 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 El viento trae sus dolorosos recuerdos. La lluvia al lanzar busca sus blancos inocentes. La neblina es algodón en la botella de píldoras. Cada pastilla es un alma perdida y un día encontrará su tribu. Poncho para los dos. Un poncho para los dos. Un poncho para los dos. Un poncho para los dos. Las nubes se van cayendo una tras una. Los árboles tienen hipo por sus consumos. La tierra entretiene el retiro, oxígeno, hidrógeno son buen amigo. Un poncho para los dos. Un poncho para los dos. Poncho para los dos. Un poncho para los dos.
Welcome back to Loud Puerto Rican Live from Amherst, Massachusetts. My name is Magdalena Gomez, and I have been with you since 11 a.m. Thanks to the generosity of all the wonderful people at Amherst Media. Thank you so much for having me here. Our local community access station that has a local, regional, national, and international reach. Look out for your own access stations and see what you can do there to raise money to support other people in the world who are suffering, because it's not just Puerto Rico. We have a lot of things going on in this world right now, and there is a tendency to despair. And so what I say is, don't despair. Create art and take action. This is a time for us to come together, to love each other, to cook meals for each other, to not say, oh, we'll do lunch, to actually do it, and maybe even cook it for each other and sit on a stoop and eat it. And eat with your fingers. And so I want to share the poetry now of another Boricua poet who I only got to meet once, but have heard only beautiful stories about him, his tenderness, and again his generosity and kindness and his willingness to show up to support other people when they are in need. He cooks with his beautiful poems. Jesus Abraham Laviera Sanchez, better known as Tato Laviera, was born September 5, 1950 in Santurce, Puerto Rico. He was 9 years old in 1960 when his family moved to New York City, and young Tato, knowing no English, waded into the totally new environment of the Lower East Side. He learned so successfully to move within 2 cultures and 2 languages that he became an iconic Nuyorican and the best-selling Latino poet in the United States. Laviera graduated from high school with honors in 1968 and began his college education at Cornell University. After 3 weeks, the poet decided to return to City University of New York's Brooklyn College. He never completed his undergraduate studies and decided instead to put his efforts into his community. Among his early projects was directing the University of the Streets, an educational project that helped adults obtain a high school diploma and attend college. The irony of that. He helped others do it. Also, he was an administrator at the Association of Community Services, and directed the Hispanic Drama Workshop, and joined the boards of various social agencies. His life was a beautiful amalgamation of his creativity and his commitment to his people. Before I read Tato's work, I want to read Sandra Maria's tribute to Tato Laviera. Like I said, Boricua poets just love to give each other love and create tributes to each other. And I think one of the reasons we do that is because our books go out of print really quick. Pay attention. Go to your library. Ask for the shelf where you can find Puerto Rican literature. Go ask. Find what's in your library. Find what's in your curriculum. Find what's in your school. When I say Pedro Pietri, do you know him? Have you heard of him? When I say Tato Laviera, Sandra Maria Esteves, José Ángel Figueroa, Iris Morales, Ramón Emeterio Betances, Lolita Lebrón, do you know who I'm talking about? If you don't, it's been absent and erased from your curriculum, so we work to unerase it. And here is Sandra Maria Esteves' poem for Tato Laviera, and it is called To These Poets. These old poets, these messengers, these teachers who come into our lives from places beyond, with lessons to be learned, crafting similes and metaphors, comparing and contrasting, full of dramatic alliterations and dynamic allusions, flying rhythms and syncopated beats in a harmonic fusion. What is this gift that opens itself to see? What is their cause and reason? What is this message and why? These old masters, these word warriors who give voice to highways in the cosmos of thought, who stand up, who rise from their sprouting seeds to be counted, to declare, to claim their place in the circle of life, who are presente to confront justice, to confront injustice, to reach out to another, to show, to give, to nurture, who are mountains and thunderstorms, lakes and gardens, who are songs of humanity, sad songs and fast songs, holy songs, songs that embrace and celebrate, songs that shine light into darkness, songs that are rooted in the real, full of passion, where even anger is a form of love, songs that heal. These teachers, this symphony of voices and meaning, this mothership of community, this spirit guides who call our names, this circle that pulses, burns, and unravels, who hide their internal silence, then burst into us like fire and sunlight, who paved the road long before we were born and endured profound sacrifices we cannot even imagine in our comfortable and spoiled lives, who marched through neighborhoods armed with history and knowledge to knock down indifferent doors, who lived in subsidized housing, who stood on pantry lines to feed their families, who forced open the gates of biased universities so that our children and each of you could be educated, who dismantled the hypocrisy of apartheid, who brandished nation-building tools with visionary minds, who read books about art and revolution, and wrote the book of struggle and freedom, who descended from indigenous peoples, who were slaves in factories and warehouses, who moved from tenement to tenement, from island to island, who lit candles with offerings to honor their ancestors, who raised their children and did not abandon them, who changed diapers, scrubbed floors, washed dishes, cooked delicious feast every day, and did all that was necessary, who buried their brothers and mothers and still found ways to console each other, who never gave up when they were expected to fail, who made magic in music and danced some mean mambos, who kicked butterflies and backstrokes into the oceans of survival, farmed the land and harvested its bounty, who transformed the limitations of ordinary existence into extraordinary creativity. To these mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, daughters and sons who embrace each other's differences, who search for knowledge in obscure locations because they need to know. They need to know and leave the stories and records of their poems long after they are gone. With imagination that penetrates beyond thick walls, transcending the boundaries of space, with strength and elegance, whose fresh water circulates in the river of our being, who carry us to the shores of creation with words that are swords, that fulfill and liberate, that caress and adore, that are tools to sculpt and shape paradigms, that mark a path into the cinemascope of tomorrow to reach and teach all of us who will follow how to be fearless, to dare and to dream. To each of these urban griots, for each letter and syllable of sound sent to seek us, for each word and verse that lifts us from the abyss that comes to bless us, for each sincere intention selflessly given, for each thunderous cry that reaches the ears of heaven, for each door that opens to welcome us, for each bridge in the crossing, for each soul saved, we celebrate your being and say, thank you. Merci. Arigato, danka, shukran, grazie, asante sana, gracias y más. Con bendiciones, recibido en muchísimo. Ashe. So you heard the poem of Sandra's tribute to the elders and that she dedicated to Tato Laviera. And now I'd like to read you something by Tato Laviera, who wrote Rican, which is here in my suitcase of books. These are just a few books from my home collection. If we were to put all the books that have been created by Puerto Rican authors, we could probably fill this studio. Some of us have had to publish ourselves. Some of us have made pamphlets, but we get published. And we have books, and we have academic books, and we are scholars, and we are astronauts, and we are physicists, and we are doctors, and we are lawyers. And we run the gamut of everything that everyone else on this planet can be. And sometimes people forget that because we live in a world that stereotypes people of color. And we are not that stereotype. Somos de sangre. Somos de carne, somos de hueso, somos de corazón. So here is Tato Laviera's poem, Spanglish. Pues estoy creando Spanglish, bicultural systems, scientific, lexicographical, intertextual integrations, two expressions, existentially wired, two dominant languages, continentally abrazándose, en colloquial combate, en las aceras del soil, Imperio Spanglish emerges. Control, pendillaje sobre territorio bilingual, las novelas mexicanas mixing with radio rock and roll, condimented cocina lore, immigrant, migrant, nasal mispronouncements, baraja, chismeteo, social club, hip hop, prieto, street salsa, corner soul, en mixturado, Spanish pop, farándula, standard English classroom with computer technicalities. Spanglish is literally perfect. Spanglish is ethnically snobbish. Spanglish is carajoli inteligencia. Which U.S. slang do you speak? Oh, my stomach is growling. Can you hear it out there in California? I know I have friends in California who are listening. Oh, maybe different time zone, huh? Well, eventually you'll hear their stomach growling if you didn't hear it already. I'm a Rican by Tato Laviera. We give birth to a new generation. American, broader than lost gold never touched, hidden inside the Puerto Rican mountains. We give birth to a new generation. American. It includes everything imaginable. You name it, we got it, society. We gave birth to a new generation. American salutes all folklores, European, Indian, Black, Spanish, and anything else compatible. American, singing to composer Pedro Flores's palm trees up high in the universal sky. American, sweet, soft Spanish danzas, gypsies moving lyrics, La Española cascabeling, presence always singing at our side. American, beating jíbaro, modern, troubadours, crying guitars, romantic, continental, bolero love songs. American, across, forth, and across, back, back across, and forth, back, forth across, and back and forth. Our trips are walking bridges. It all dissolved into itself. An attempt was truly made. The attempt was truly absorbed, digested. We spit out the poison. We spit out in malice. We stand affirmative in action to reproduce a broader answer to the marginality that gobbled us up so abruptly. Walking plena rhythms in New York, strutting beautifully alert, alive, many turning eyes, wondering, admiring. American, defining myself my own way, anyway, many, many ways. Am-a-Rican, with the big R and the accent on the I. Amorican, American, like the soul gliding talk of gospel boogie music. American. Speaking new words in Spanglish tenements, fast tongue moving street corner, que corta, talk being invented at the insistence of a smile. American, abounding inside so many ethnic English people, and out of humanity we blend and mix all that is good. American, integrating in New York and defining our own destino, our own way of life. American, defining the new America, humane America, admired America, loved America, harmonious America, the world in peace, our energies collectively invested to find other civilizations, to touch God further and further, to dwell in the spirit of divinity. American, yes, for now I love this, my second land, and I dream to take the accent from the altercation and to be proud to call myself American in the U.S. sense of the word. Am-a-Rican America. From Tato Laviera, from Bendición, the complete poetry of Tato Laviera, copyright 2014, reprinted by permission of Arte Público Press. And I would like to take a break now because I need a break and I need to think about those images. I need to hear that music. I need a time to reflect. So if we could just have a little a little music, my friends, some more of those images. And as you think of the images, think about maybe writing your own poems. How about if you've never written a poem, write your first and send that to someone in Puerto Rico. Send that to someone it may comfort, encourage, and enliven. As you look at those images, allow them to conjure words in your spirit and put your pen to paper and become a poet, because inside of every human being, regardless of who we are or where we are, there lives a poet.
Un poncho para los dos. 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 El viento trae sus dolorosos recuerdos. La lluvia al lanzar busca sus blancos inocentes. La neblina es algodón en la botella de píldoras. Cada pastilla es un alma perdida y un día encontrará su tribu. Poncho para los dos. Un poncho para los dos. Un poncho para los dos. Un poncho para los dos. Las nubes se van cayendo una tras una. Los árboles tienen hipo por sus consumos. La tierra entretiene el retiro, oxígeno, hidrógeno son buen amigo. Un poncho para los dos. Un poncho para los dos. Poncho para los dos. Un poncho para los dos.
Welcome back, familia. I am your loud Puerto Rican live, Magdalena Gomez, here at Amherst Media in Amherst, Massachusetts. Now, I mentioned before you were viewing the slides that, let them inspire you to write. May they also inspire you to write a check or to go online and make a donation to the Boston Foundation. They're doing a great gathering of money. Last I heard, they were up to $800,000 just for this effort of Puerto Rican relief and relocation. And they are also looking at long term as people start to come into the state. So please consider, right, if you're there watching this on Facebook, that link is right there accessible. It's tbf.org. As little as $10, okay? We say $10. I would like to say $1, but we have to say 10 because if you're paying by credit card, there are fees involved on their end. So $10 minimum, $10,000 maximum. If you're very wealthy and you're contemplating buying a 5th car, let me encourage you to make that $10,000 donation. Also, if you happen to buy coffee out every day, let me encourage you to make coffee at home and carry it in one of those nice environmentally, supportive cups and put that money into an empty coffee can at home and see how much you have by the end of a month saved up that you can donate to the charity of your choice. Well, I don't like to call them charities because that sounds like, a bendito, They're not charities. This is about justice. This is about redistributing what we have to share with others in times of need. So please, open up your heart, open up your wallet, and, press that little button and make that donation and know that it's going to an organization that's been around for a very long time, is reputable, and will get that money to the people. So visit thebostonfoundation.org, tbf.org. And so you heard me read a poem that Sandra Maria Esteves wrote about Tato Laviera. I believe I read a little bit about Tato, yes? And I read his American. You heard American, and you also heard Spanglish by Tato Laviera. I would like to introduce you now to a very dear friend of mine. Someone I love and admire and had admired from far away for a very long time, Miss Iris Morales. Where do I begin? Perhaps I need to read you her bio first, and then I'm going to tell you some personal stories about Iris Morales. I love you, Iris. I hope you're tuned in today. I'm thinking of you. So Iris Morales is an educator and a lifelong community activist. She brings her legacy of social justice activism to her projects with young people, educators, and media producers, promoting human rights and the decolonization of Puerto Rico. For 30 years, Ms. Morales has built organizations dedicated to grassroots organizing, community empowerment, and media. As the founder and executive editor of Red Sugarcane Press, she publishes books about the Puerto Rican and Latina diasporas in the Americas. Ms. Morales was a member of the Young Lords for 5 years, serving as the organization's Deputy Minister of Education and co-founder of its Women's Caucus and Women's Union. Her interviews and writings about the Young Lords have appeared in numerous magazines and books, such as Palante, The Voices and Photographs of the Young Lords, 1969 to 1971, and the Norton Anthology of Latino Literature, among others. She is also the producer, writer, and co-editor of the award-winning film Palante, Siempre Palante, The Young Lords, which premiered on public television and has screened across the United States and the Caribbean. Ms. Morales travels nationally as a public speaker at colleges, universities, and community venues. She is an attorney, a graduate of New York University School of Law, and earned an MFA in Integrated Media Arts from Hunter College in New York. Now, if you are not familiar with the Young Lords Party, because our time is limited here, I cannot give you the comprehensive history that I would love to give you, but I want you to go and Google the Young Lords Party. I want you to Google Iris Morales. And I want you to know that history because it is in your best interest, because you can use those stories to encourage and support young people to stand up for justice. This Young Lord Party, this was national movement by young people for social justice. And some of them were as young as 12 and 14 years old. And this movement made a difference in the history of the United States and in the lives of all people, not just Puerto Ricanos. So first I'm going to start with a personal story about Iris, okay? This dress that I'm wearing, okay, I purchased when I was with Iris Morales, and also another poet whom I love and I hope we'll have time to read is Jose Angel Figueroa, another one of the great vanguard of the New Rican literary movement, who was also a great supporter of my work and to this very day continues to support me and nurture me and love me and encourage me through the difficult times. Jose Angel Figueroa, shout out to you, my brother. I was with both of them, and we were at this flea market on Columbus Avenue and 73rd Street, this wonderful outdoor flea market where everybody in the community comes out to sell their stuff. And I think it was Jose Angel he's very good at picking out clothes for his, his friends and the women, and he's just so generous with that. And so he spotted this dress, and I said, mine! So I purchased this dress for $3 because I believe that instead of spending $100 on a dress, I would rather spend $3 on a dress and have $97 that I can send to the Boston Foundation. So, like how I slipped that in? So this dress was from a day of fun and joy. And the necklace, again, is Olga Ayala. She is una artesana boricua who lives in Staten Island in New York. And she's online too, hecho a mano, Olga Ayala, A-Y-A-L-A. I'm dyslexic, so Ayala. Sound it out, sound it out. And she does these beautiful, beautiful artwork. This is Yemaya, the mother of all children, the goddess of all waters. She is an African Orisha. And I love this image. So I am wearing a necklace by a person who creates art with love. I am wearing a dress that I bought for $3 in a street fair with two of our greatest living activists, artists, writers, poets, Jose Angel Figueroa and Iris Morales. And I was on my way that day. I had to go to catch a train back home. I didn't want to drive to New York. I just didn't want to. Sometimes, it's just too much, the ride. So I took an Amtrak train and I realized I was lugging my bags around and everything and realized, oh my God, I'm going to be late for my train. So we ran to the subway, the three of us, right? None of us are kids, okay? So we ran to the subway and then I realized my Metro card was out. So I just said, oh well, and I jumped the turnstile. And so the three of us get on the train and we're just laughing hysterically, Oh, we could just see the headlines now. Geriatric Puerto Rican busted for jumping the turnstile on the Upper West Side. So I haven't written that poem yet, but I think I better, huh? Anyway, I just want to show you one of the books that Iris has published. She started Red Sugar Cane Press. And by the way, she was the one who published my Shameless Woman book that I read from before. That's from Red Sugar Cane Press. Iris Morales is the first person to publish an entire collection of my work. Besides myself, I've published 2 poetry CDs with my work. And I'm in a lot of periodicals, and I've been published since the early 70s. I've been published quite a great deal, but no one ever wanted to do an entire book until Iris Morales did it in 2014. So I got to thank Iris for collecting my work and my memoir and poems, Shameless Woman. Thank you, Iris, for making that happen. And she started this press for writers that she believes in. And she has also published Through the Eyes of Rebel Women, which is from the voices of the women of the Young Lords Party. And I would like to read to you something that she wrote in 1970 when she was in her early 20s. This is not a commonly known history because the history of Puerto Rico and the colonial relationship that Puerto Rico has with the United States, because we are not a commonwealth, really, we are a colony. And they have become synonymous. In her early 20s, she had such a high and elevated consciousness, and her moral compass was so profound, and her intelligence, that she wrote about this secret that is kept from us, which was the involuntary sterilization by the United States perpetrated upon Puerto Rican women. And she wrote this again, 1970, in her early 20s. Genocide is being committed against the Puerto Rican nation through the mass sterilization of Puerto Rican women. In no other nation has sterilization been so prevalent as a means of genocide against an oppressed people. Why Puerto Ricans? First, the United States needs Puerto Rico as a military stronghold to maintain, quote, political stability and control the rest of Latin America. Second, Puerto Rico is the fourth largest worldwide consumer of American goods and yields massive profits to American capitalists. Also, Puerto Rico supplies fighting men and a cheap labor pool, both necessary to U.S. capitalism. One way to control a nation of vital importance is to limit its population size. The U.S. is doing exactly this through sterilization. The practice of sterilization in Puerto Rico goes back to the 1930s, when doctors pushed it as the only means of contraception. As a result, throughout the island, Puerto Rican women of childbearing age were sterilized. In 1947 to 1948, 7% of the women were sterilized. Between 1953 and 1954, and 4 out of every 25 sisters were sterilized. And by 1965, the number increased to 1 in every 3 women. This system was practiced on sisters of all ages, but since 1965, the trend has been to sterilize women in their early 20s when they have had fewer babies. This is especially true among lower class sisters, where future revolutionaries would come from. Committing sterilization on young Puerto Rican mothers with fewer children means that the U.S. is able to significantly reduce and limit the Puerto Rican population in a short period of time. There's much more about that in this book, which I encourage you to get, Through the Eyes of Rebel Women by Iris Morales. There are many great writers in here. This is a book that she not only wrote in, but she edited, and it is the words and the thoughts of other young women involved and engaged in the Young Lords Party and in justice work, and in/justice work. So that is Iris Morales. Oh, one more story I didn't tell you. When my closest friend was hospitalized for having a ripped aorta at a hospital that shall remain nameless, where she was being treated very badly, very poorly. She is a black woman, and an elderly black woman, and she was considered dispensable by this hospital, and they were trying to release her at a very inappropriate time, where basically she would have died on the way out of that hospital. So I became vigilant and stayed by her bedside 24/7. As much as they'd let me stay in there, I'd be in there. And so I told Iris, you know, the hospital is not too far from where you live. May I please stay with you? And she said, oh, of course, of course. So Iris Morales brought me into her home so that I could go and walk over to the hospital and look out for the well-being of my friend and protect her from, you know, negligence, you know, death by negligence. Does that sound familiar? Death by negligence. And she said to me, go, Magdalena, take care of your friend. You take care of your friend, and I will take care of you. And every morning, for it was about 7 days, I would hear a little knock at the door from Iris' voice, from her in her guest room. She would knock on the door and say, Magdalena, good morning. I have your coffee. And she would bring me coffee in bed every day to nurture me and love me while I was making sure that my friend would survive. Well, my friend did survive. And she's thriving. And at the age of 70 years old, she's been dancing on Machu Picchu. And I have, in part, Iris Morales to thank for that. So, thank you. So, you know, as you're listening to this, if you like the work, please go online, look up Puerto Rican literature, Puerto Rican poets, Type in Boricua, B-O-R-I-C-U-A, sometimes spelled with a K, Boricua. Let me tell you about Boricua. Why do we call ourselves Boricua? Borican was the Taíno name of our island. 1,500 years before the arrival of the European invaders, there was a thriving peoples living in the Caribbean who got there first, 1,500 years before Columbus did in his little tights and Buster Brown haircut. And they were there for 1,500 years. There was equality between men and women in terms of leadership. They had thriving agriculture. The name Taíno itself means peace. This was a beautiful society. They had a game that was very similar to what we now know as baseball. We actually have words in our language that come from the Taíno people who were originally the Arawak nation that came from the basin of the Orinoco River in Venezuela. Oh, how did they get to Puerto Rico? Well, they figured out that kapok wood, the ceiba tree, it's wood that floats. I don't know if you know, have you ever seen those old, vests, survivor vests in the boats that have wood in them? That's ceiba, that's kapok, that's wood that floats. So they made these canoas, we get the word canoe, from the Taíno people of Puerto Rico and the Caribbean, canoa. They made these huge canoas and navigated by the stars. And they arrived in Puerto Rico 1,500 years before Columbus. And like I said, they had this beautiful, thriving society. And that they are from the Arawak nation, the Taínos. And words like, you know how we use the word barbecue? Hey, barbecue, and we think it's so, U.S.? It's babacoa, which is a Taíno word. Canoa, hurricane, huracán is one of the gods of the Taíno people. So, look up the Taínos. If you've been looking at the books here, you will see that the museum, Museo del Barrio and Museum Mile, a gorgeous museum dedicated to Caribbean and Latin American arts, and in part begun by poet Jack Agüeros. They put out that book on pre-Columbian art and history of the Taínos. And it's very hard to find that book now because we go out of print very quickly. So I'd like you to, call your libraries, call your bookstores and ask, where are the Puerto Rican books? I want to read more, I want to learn more. And ask that the shelves get a little heavier with the weight of the books of our people and not just the dirty bottom shelves of those libraries where I have often found books when I've been looking for them. So, where to go? We don't have a lot of time left, and I do want to share with you something of another beautiful woman, Boricua poet, Mirna Nieves. Mirna Nieves. If you look at the books, we have Abriendo Caminos. ¿A dónde está? Breaking Ground here. Okay. If we can get on the books, that would be great. A shot on the books. Abriendo Caminos, Breaking Ground. That was an anthology that Mirna Nieves created of all Puerto Rican poets, women in New York. So it is Anthology of Puerto Rican Women Writers in New York from 1980 to 2012. And I have the honor of being in that book. And I want to read to you from Dr. Nieves, Dr. Mirna Nieves, Snapshots, New York, 2012. The hurricane hit hard. In a few hours, the picket-fenced homes were washed away. The TV, cable, phone, stoves all lost power. Quote, "It must surely be the end of days," a man in an R. Lauren jacket said. A homeless man looked at him quietly. For him, the end of days had come a long time ago. Fuchsia and blue, the sky blew merciless on the trees. I cried when they bent. My friend's roof flew away, an unlikely magic carpet in the wind. Why? The days of the BP spill in the Gulf were gone. The fuel emissions can't be responsible for such destruction, a woman said with a polished ivory necklace. Somebody remembered a certain trepidation in her voice that a woman scientist discovered thousands of unexploded bombs in the bottom of the sea. I saw the photograph. A crab attached to the moss was playing with a rusty valve. The lower part of the city was dark, a modern ghost town of the corporate age. A couple attempted to cross a street with a flashlight in the black. The evacuated apartments sighed, orphans soaked in rain in a shelter. A white supremacist accepted a blanket from a volunteering black man. And I decided to go check if my hostile neighbors were fine. Meanwhile, in Howard Beach, 2 sharks swim near a flooded porch. We'll see what the morning brings. And here, we're running out of time, so many of the poets whose work I would love to read, I don't believe that I will have a chance. But I do want to read something for you by a local poet, Maria Luisa Arroyo, who lives in Springfield and made history by becoming the first poet laureate of Springfield, Massachusetts. Born in Manatí, Puerto Rico, and raised in Springfield, she received her BA from Colby College and a master's from Tufts University and an MFA from Pine Manor College. And she is ABD, all but ABD at Harvard, and speaks about 5 languages fluently, which include Farsi and German. So here is a poem by Maria Luisa Arroyo. Don't call me ghetto. Don't call me ghetto just because I choose to wear gold earrings with my name, clothes that hug me here and there, and nails bright with colors and designs. I dress to express, not to impress, not you. And I am who I am and not who you want me to be. Don't call me ghetto just because my mama can only afford a tiny apartment that some lazy landlord forgets to maintain. You don't see how hard my mama works, cooks, and cleans, and takes care of me and our family. Don't call where I live ghetto whenever you drive by and see only old red brick buildings huddled together or clusters of decaying duplexes with clothes flapping on the line. Here is our home, and we take care of our own. And comunidad is not just about white picket fences. Don't call us ghetto. Just because you drive from out of town, you think you are on safari as you shake your head and those poor little brown Latinos. You think you help when you try to bribe us with candy or our parents with a $50 check for a free meal for some university study that never benefits us. Whenever you judge us for being poor, you are ghetto. Whenever you talk down to me because I have a Spanish last name or because mommy speaks English with a heavy accent, you are ghetto. Ghetto is a state of mind, not mine. Maria Luisa Arroyo. And I am going to close with a poem of mine that was published recently by Honeysuckle Magazine. Online, please visit Honeysuckle Magazine. I believe they are .com. After 2 hours, my brain is failing me at the moment, but Honeysuckle Magazine, look them up. And this is my closing poem, and it is called We Interrupt This. Maria, I don't blame you. Your name, chosen with malicious intent. You are the West Side Story girl, default name for all of our women when bigots drink too much. You are the twin of Jose, the mother of El Niño. Maria, you are not a hurricane. Maria, you are the distraction from deeper meanings of destruction. The history of abuse and involuntary sterilizations, scapegoat of imperialism and colonial thugs. Maria, the use of your name, insidious blame that somehow we have done this to ourselves. The village idiot of the world defiles you, sees in you a woman he can grab by the pussy, as security detail obediently avert their eyes. Maria, you have been repeatedly gang raped, then called a whore by rapists who hide behind the village idiot of the world, too stupid to know he's their fall guy. The unzipped lout, gurgling with profanities and primary school adjectives, who abhors the sound of Spanish. Maria, you have been robbed of your riches by parasitic thieves who call you a deadbeat. Predatory scavengers have long been with us, defecating in once clear waters, bloody talons digging through fertile soil to grow unnatural things, calculated contaminations mutating all semblance of justice. Erosion by malicious negligence, ethnic cleansing of we who are called cockroaches by deviant exterminators, counting their bounty by death, their doughy flesh coddled in brass-tacked leather made of skins peeled from the backs of the silenced, top-shelf cocktails swirl into hurricanes. Tightly rolled cigars with names the smokers mispronounce burst into aberrant flames. Ice cubes clink against the baccarat, flaring up the Richter scale. My eyes refuse to close, despite my weary body's pleading. There are parts of us that cannot be touched, or harmed, or killed, or forced to sleep. As evil is legion, so is love. As greed replicates, so does resistance. Like the pelican offering its throat to feed its young. Like courageous hands wielding machetes to clear impassable roads, like scarce water shared in the presence of death, history pours its waterfall of wisdom upon the next generation to take back what is theirs, beginning with their names: Boricua, Maria, Jose. I feel very excited. Somebody just walked into the studio who I really love and admire. Her name is Alvilda Sofia Anaya Alegria. I always have to read her name because it's such a long one, you know, and I don't know if you know this, but some of you know I had a brain injury. So, you know, doing all these words is not so easy for me. So anyway, she's someone that is always there when she's needed. She always shows up. No matter what it is, she's there. Alvilda is everywhere where she is needed. And I want to read her bio so that I don't start gushing, okay? Alvilda Sofia Anaya Alegria was born in Guayama, Puerto Rico. Alvilda has studied visual arts at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst and holds a master's degree in economics from the University of New Hampshire. She is going to be reading a poem that she wrote. She was actually in Puerto Rico during the hurricane. So she has a beautiful poem that she's written that she's going to share with you now. So please remember this name, Alvilda Sofia Anaya Alegria.
I'm excited to be here with Magdalena and excited that this is happening. It gave me an opportunity to write a poem to my city of Guayama, because to speak about my name is to speak about my town, and that's part of my bio. And it's titled in Spanish, and the whole poem is in Spanish. A ti, Guayama querida, he podido jugar con tu palomar, recordar tu sonrisa, acariciar tu piel. Recuerdo el carrito de piragua parado en aquella esquina, a donde juegan los niños con plenas sonrisas. Qué lindo es verte, Guayama, cada vez que te doy una vuelta, en aquellos rumbos por nunca terminar, donde se forjan sueños como la golondrina, llevando su canto a lugares que germinan. Voy cerro arriba a sentir tu ánima, en todo su verdor que se arrima. Eres Guayama linda la que abraza mi caminar, es aquel lugar que de niña me domina. Eres la luz de mis ojos que siempre mira de una esquina. Eres la torre grande de aquellos sueños ancestros que nos dan sus campanadas. Campanadas que susurran, ven que te voy a dar de comida. Y mientras sus caballos cabalgan por las sendas de Carioca, donde sonríes, mis amigas. Eres el manantial que brota por las espigas. Eres la dulce fruta que en la playa germina. Eres la flor de maga que suspira. Eres como el guatibilí que no se deja vencer por ninguna espina. Eres la flor que se cruza con las hojas brujas que se cocinan. Voy descalza por tus veredas para jugar en tus árboles, resguardándome, viajando hacia el océano que nos contempla y nos mira. Eres mi Guayama, mi ciudad bruja que se encuentra en la estación de un otoño, en miras de un invierno, esperando su sol de verano, mientras los árboles de laureles de la India dominan. Todo se ha ido menos mi dulce sueño que sigue reinando, parado, resguardado por una pared, plasmado como una gran vitrina. Oh, mi Guayama, le dices al mundo, vamos a jugar por nuestra plaza. Vamos a resguardar nuestros sueños ancestrales hasta que llegue la primavera. Y de ahí lucir nuestro traje nuevo, con sus prismas de colores, enseñando nuestros cristales. Abracemos nuestras raíces profundas, indígenas, taínas, africanas y españolas, acurrucados en un ir y venir, abrazados por el océano. Mientras el sol nos refleja, el cuenco negro y reluciente entre las sombras y nuestro verde chatre retollando. Haz mi dulce sueño. Si fueras humano, diría yo soy patriota borincano. Gracias.
That was a beautiful, beautiful poem and a beautiful way to end our time together. Like, we can't hear you, of course. You can hear us, but we can't hear you. So, but we can feel you. So let me hear a big cheer for Puerto Rico, for Alvilda, for all the poets, for all the artists who keep us going. Let me hear it.